Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, October 6th, 2025. All right, this episode of Anti-War News is sponsored by the Expat Money Online Summit, which returns this October. This is the third year in a row that they are sponsoring the show and that we are helping promote the event. And the Expat Money Summit is hosted by Mikkel Thorpe, the host of the Expat Money Show, a friend of ours at antiwar.com. And this free online event is packed with real strategies that you can use right now, like acquiring second residencies and citizenships, legally mitigating taxes, purchasing international real estate, setting up offshore banking, and more. This year's summit is focused on Latin America, and for very good reason, with all of the changing dynamics down there, and that is where Mikkel is based as well. So over 3 jam-packed days from October 10th to the 12th, Mikkel is bringing together top-tier experts to help you build your offshore plan B quickly and effectively in the region. Head over to expatmoneysummit.com to reserve your free ticket today. And once again, I will be speaking on one of the exclusive VIP panels. So if you want to get a VIP ticket, listeners of this show can use the code ANTIWAR for 20% off a VIP ticket, which includes lifetime replays, exclusive panels, and more. So go to expatmoneysummit.com and don't forget to use that code ANTIWAR if you want a VIP ticket for 20% off. Once again, expatmoneysummit.com. All right, so obviously the big news from the weekend was Hamas's response to the U.S. and Israeli proposal for Gaza, and which they issued that on Friday, and President Trump appeared to be happy with it, saying that it showed that Hamas wants or seeks long-term peace, and he called on Israel to stop the bombing of Gaza. Unfortunately, the bombing has not stopped. The slaughter in Gaza continues, and we'll get more into that. But I just want to read, this is the statement from Hamas. This is their response to that U.S.-Israeli ceasefire proposal. If you remember some of the details, it calls for the immediate release of all the Israeli captives. But to facilitate that release, there would be a halt of Israeli military operations. And then it got into some long-term things like demilitarization in exchange for the Israeli withdrawal, which is kind of one of the likely sticking points. So essentially, Hamas says in this statement that they're ready to release all the hostages and enter negotiations on the deals, on the details of the deal. So they said, quote, "In this context and in a matter that achieves an end to the war and the full Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, the movement announces its approval to release all prisoners of the occupation, both living and the bodies of the deceased, according to the exchange formula included in President Trump's proposal, and with the provision of appropriate field conditions for carrying out the exchange process. In this regard, the movement affirms its readiness to immediately enter into negotiations through the mediators to discuss the details. The movement also reiterates its approval to hand over the administration of the Gaza Strip to a Palestinian body composed of independents, technocrats based on Palestinian national consensus and supported by Arab and Islamic backing. As for the other issues included in President Trump's proposal that relate to the future of the Gaza Strip and the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people, these are subject to a comprehensive national position and must be based on relevant international laws and resolutions. These matters shall be discussed within a unified Palestinian national framework in which Hamas will participate and contribute with full responsibility," end quote. So that is the statement. So when they released the statement, the question were the U.S. and Israel going to take this as an acceptance of the proposal and enter negotiations, or were they going to say, oh, they're rejecting it, that's it, we're going to finish the job? Well, it appeared Trump accepted it and is put out again that statement. According to all the Israeli media reports from that day, Netanyahu took it as a rejection and was hoping that that would be it for the negotiations, but not the case. So to get into the news here, we have a ton of stories to go through, like usual. So the first story at the top of antiwar.com, Israel says no ceasefire despite Trump's call to stop the bombing. So the Israeli government said on Sunday that there is no ceasefire in place in Gaza, despite President Trump's calls for Israel to immediately stop the bombing of Gaza as the IDF continues to slaughter Palestinians across the Strip. So the statement Trump said, his initial statement in response said Israel must immediately stop the bombing. And they didn't do that. So this is what an Israeli government spokeswoman said. She said, quote, while certain bombings have actually stopped inside of the Gaza Strip, there's no ceasefire in place at this point in time. End quote. She added that Netanyahu has been in regular contact with Trump and that the upcoming negotiations in Egypt aimed at securing the release of Israelis held by Hamas and implementing a ceasefire will be, quote, confined to a few maximum days with no tolerance for maneuvers that will delay talks by Hamas, end quote. So Trump first made the call for Israel to stop bombing Gaza on Friday after Hamas issued its response to the U.S.-Israeli proposal. On Saturday, Trump said that he appreciated that Israel had temporarily stopped the bombing. But on that same day, the IDF killed at least 70 Palestinians in Gaza. That's about the rate that they've been killing them at over the past few weeks. So there was no halt, no relief for the Palestinians on the ground, no change. So the IDF has killed at least 129 Palestinians in Gaza over the past 2 days, and that's based on the daily updates released by Gaza's health ministry, based on Sunday and Saturday. So they put out their daily death toll updates about midday Gaza time for the previous 24-hour period. So based on the one from Sunday and Saturday, they killed at least 129 over those 2 days. And medical sources told Al Jazeera that Israeli attacks on Sunday killed at least 24 Palestinians, including at least 12 who were killed in Gaza City. According to Israeli media, the IDF was ordered to halt its operation to conquer Gaza City, but it has continued to bomb the area. And then you see the Israeli media report says, oh, these are only defensive strikes, which is just a complete joke. At least one of the strikes killed a whole bunch of children. In Gaza City's Al-Tufa neighborhood, it killed 18 people, including 7 children between the ages of 2 months and 8 years. So very young children massacred. And again, that was on Saturday. So on Sunday, the death toll was 24. So still killing a lot of people in Gaza. I saw Marco Rubio was saying, so Monday, the ceasefire negotiations are supposed to begin in Egypt. And Rubio was saying that they should stop the striking before then. So we'll see if Israel actually does that. I mean, this is Trump publicly calling on Israel to halt the bombing. I'll admit I got excited about it when I saw him say that. I was hoping it meant, something was really going to happen here. But then the weekend goes by and there's more death and destruction in Gaza. And if Trump really does want a deal here, he's going to have to put real significant pressure on Netanyahu. And it's not clear if he's really willing to do that. So the next one here, Netanyahu says Israel will not do Gaza plan until all hostages released. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly said on Sunday that Israel will not implement any other point of the Gaza ceasefire plan released by President Trump until Hamas releases all remaining Israeli captives in Gaza. And if they remember, this is an exchange, essentially a prisoner exchange. Under the plan, I forget the exact numbers, but they're going to release a few hundred Palestinians who are sentenced to life sentences in Israeli prisons, and then also at least 1,000 Palestinians who were just captured by IDF forces in Gaza for no good reason. They don't need a reason to throw people in jail. So Netanyahu said, quote, until the first clause, the release of all the hostages, living and dead, until the last of the hostages, all of them, is transferred to Israeli territory, we will not move on to any other clause, end quote. So this could be Netanyahu, again, trying to sabotage things because he knows from Hamas's point of view, if they release all the Israeli captives that they still have, then that's it. That's basically, there goes all their leverage. And then if they don't get anything in return, before that or right away, they might suspect that they're going to try to get all the Israelis out and then just restart the bombing right after that. So Israel has continued to bomb Gaza since Hamas's response, as I just covered. let's see what else is here. So it also sounded like Netanyahu was talking about some kind of deadline set by President Trump. He said that if Hamas does not release all the hostages by the end of the time set by President Trump, that Israel would go back on the offensive in Gaza with the full backing of all the countries involved. So the deal that was released by the White House, the outline, said that they must release the captives within 72 hours of Israel publicly accepting the agreement, but all the details still need to be worked out. So I assume that means once the agreement is actually ironed out and implemented, then there's 72 hours to release everybody. But again, we really need to see U.S. pressure on Israel and on Netanyahu to make this all a reality at this point. So we will see what happens in the coming days, again, with these negotiations starting in Cairo. Really hoping that this does lead to, I mean, there's still no aid going in. People, I should have mentioned in the other story, Palestinians are still starving to death in Gaza. It's just, I think, important for people to understand that despite all the announcements and talk, there's no relief yet for the people actually in Gaza. All right, so the next one here, they fled to South Gaza as ordered, then Israel killed them. So this article is from Middle East Eye, just about a family that was killed, that was expelled from Gaza City, and they went south as the IDF ordered them, and then they set up a tent in Deir al-Balah, central Gaza, and they were killed. And this was a man, Sami Dawood, who went down to Deir al-Balah with his daughter, and they were killed with several other Palestinians in the airstrike. And, you know, we've had other stories. I believe it was last week when a family was killed in a tent in Al-Mawasi, which is literally where they're telling them to go, and they're still bombing it. It's just, you know, what do they expect? How do they expect to clear out the city when you're still bombing the place where you're telling them to go? All right, so the next one here, Netanyahu ordered the attack on aid boats in Tunisia. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu directly ordered attacks on the global Sumud flotilla that were carried out in early September while the boats were moored in Tunisia. And this was reported by CBS News on Friday. So a total of 2 boats were hit in 2 attacks that were conducted on September 8th and September 9th. 2 U.S. intelligence officials told CBS that Israeli forces fired drones from a submarine that dropped incendiary devices and caused fires. The report noted that under international law, the use of incendiary devices against civilian populations or civilian targets is prohibited in all cases. So a war crime, very clearly dropping something like this on a civilian boat that's trying to bring food to people that you're starving. This is a video of one of these devices being dropped on these boats, and this is a pretty significant fire and fireball that it causes here. In both cases, the fires were started by the attack, and the crews were able to put them out, and there were no injuries or deaths or anything, so thank God for that. And so Tom Barrack, the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, who's also involved in all sorts of other negotiations in the Middle East, he actually said in an interview last month on September 22nd that Israel, he said like, Israel's attacking everybody. They even, they're attacking Syria, Lebanon, Tunisia, which was like public confirmation from a U.S. official that it was Israel behind this. One reason why I wanted to cover this is that there was a big, Hasbara Zionist influencer propaganda campaign. They were all claiming that the crew fired a flare on themselves, like shot it up in the air and watched it drop on their boat. And, they just had no evidence for that. One of them posted one of the videos where you can't really see, everything's out of frame, but you do see a fire start. And now we have reporting that Netanyahu himself ordered this attack. And I'm sure he also ordered the attack when they came under drone attack off the coast of Greece. And again, now we'll get into this in the next one, but all the activists, including 24 American citizens, have been captured, are in Israeli captivity. Some of them are starting to be deported. I believe a few dozen have been deported. Not clear the status of the Americans. All right, the next one here. Ben Gvir said that he's proud Israel is treating flotilla activists as terrorists. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir touted Israel's mistreatment of activists who were members of a flotilla that was attempting to bring food and baby formula to the starving people of Gaza. Allegations have been made that that Israeli troops or prison guards have abused Swedish activist Greta Thunberg. Ben-Gvir stated that he visited the facility where the flotilla activists were detained. I think I mentioned this in the last one. I saw a video of him calling them terrorists. So essentially what happened here, so there's allegations from other people that were in Israeli captivity with her and said that she was beaten, that they dragged her by her hair, beat her, and forced her to kiss an Israeli flag. Again, this is an allegation from a Turkish activist who was released from Israel. And I think it was the Israeli Foreign Ministry or some other government agency put out a statement denying it, saying, oh, it's absurd to say that we would do that to Greta. But then Ben-Gvir puts out a statement saying that he's proud that the flotilla activists are being treated like terrorists. And we know, since October 7th, Israeli prisons have always had horrific conditions for Palestinians. But since Ben-Gvir took over, and then especially since October 7th, things have gotten worse. Something like 67 Palestinians have died in Israeli captivity since October 7th. They limit food. They keep them in filthy conditions. Everybody gets scabies. There's bed bugs and things like that. So this is what Ben-Gvir said amid these allegations that Greta Thunberg was treated like that. He said, quote, "I went to visit Hegseth prison and I was proud that we are treating the flotilla activists as terror supporters. Whoever supports terrorism is a terrorist and deserves the conditions of terrorists. It is worthwhile for them to experience the conditions in Hegseth prison and think twice before they come close to Israel again. That's how it works," end quote. This is our greatest ally, the Israeli government. That's the guy in charge of Israeli prisons, Israeli police, Israeli border police. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. gives Lebanon $230 million in military aid. So the Trump administration has approved $230 million worth of military and security aid for Lebanon as it's pushing the Lebanese government to disarm Hezbollah, and this was reported by Reuters on Friday. The Hill reported that the U.S. sent the $230 million on September 30th as a last-minute action before the government shutdown, so the funds would not expire. One congressional aide said that it's not a huge amount, but for a small country like Lebanon, it is a significant amount. And a Lebanese source told Reuters that $190 million will go toward the Lebanese Armed Forces, or LAF, and $40 million is for the internal security forces. On September 10th, the U.S. Department of War announced a $14 million weapons package for the LAF that it said would help dismantle weapons caches and military infrastructure of non-state groups, including Hezbollah. So they've been given a lot of military aid to the Lebanese government. And Tom Barrack, he's the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, but he's been very involved in these talks in Lebanon. And he said in that same September 22nd interview that the U.S. was arming the LAF, the Lebanese Armed Forces, so it could fight its own people. This is what he said, quote, "Are we going to arm them so they can fight Israel? I don't think so. So you're arming them so they can fight their own people, Hezbollah. Hezbollah is our enemy. Iran is our enemy," end quote. So his comments came as, the critic of this policy of what the U.S. is trying to do here in Lebanon was that they're going to start a civil war. And then here you have the U.S. envoy involved in all these negotiations saying that we're arming Lebanon so they can fight their own people. And I think a lot of people know how nasty the Lebanese civil war was. This is not something that we want to push that country back in that direction again. So, and this comes, of course, as Israel's flagrantly violated the ceasefire with near daily strikes on southern Lebanon. Have killed hundreds of people since they signed the ceasefire deal in November 2024, including at least, which has been verified by the UN, at least 103 civilians. All right, so the next one here, UN peacekeepers in Lebanon urge Israel to stop attacks on them. So this is an article from Jason Ditz. The UNIFIL peacekeepers have issued a statement over the weekend after a Friday incident in the southern Lebanese border town of Maroun El Ras, in which an Israeli drone dropped grenades near their position in the area. The drone strikes started around 11:30 a.m., according to the report, with a grenade dropped 30 to 40 meters away from the Irish Peacekeepers. The second grenade was dropped 20 minutes later, exploding overhead, though fortunately not causing any casualties among personnel nor the civilian workers that they were there to protect. The UNIFIL has called on Israel to stop carrying out attacks on or near their own forces or near Lebanese army personnel. And something similar happened early last month. They dropped a grenade in the area. The IDF is claiming that it was a mistake and that the UNIFIL patrol was Hezbollah. But I mean, if you ever see you could see the picture here. I mean, the UN peacekeepers, they got bright white trucks. A lot of times they wear the blue uniforms with the blue helmets. I mean, you're not going to mistake them for Hezbollah. It's just I think they're just trying to terrorize them to get them out, because Israel's very clear that they do not want these UN peacekeepers there. All right, so the next one here, the IDF arrests 3 Syrians in southwest Syria. So this is another one from Jason. So this was on Saturday. Israeli troops carried out a night raid in the Syrian village of Jamla in the Dara governorate. The troops arrived in 6 military vehicles, established a checkpoint outside the village, but also entered and raided homes from around an hour while IDF drones flew overhead. The troops left ultimately, but captured 3 local youths in the process and took them with them. Who exactly they were and what the pretext for the arrest was is as yet unknown, as the IDF has not commented on the matter. Syrian state media offered a report somewhat after the fact, but only said that the 3 were local residents. So we don't really know the details, but it says that their whereabouts is still unknown as of Sunday. And this has become just a regular occurrence in southwest Syria, this area that Israel has invaded and is occupying. They invaded after the regime change that ousted Assad. And they just kind of do these raids on these little villages. And I mean, this gets like no media attention. Jason gets this mostly from the Syrian Observatory and Syrian media, but you just really don't hear about this at all in the Western press. All right, so the next one here, election without voters. Syrians are unaware of parliamentary election. So this one is from the Cradle. So many Syrians are unaware that the first parliamentary elections since the fall of the government of Bashar al-Assad are about to take place, AP reported on October 4th, in part because the Syrian public will not be allowed to cast votes. So essentially, the way that this is working here, so they're calling these elections, but the Syrian citizens are not allowed to vote. They're not voting in the elections, so they're not really elections. Rather than allow the Syrian public to vote in Sunday's election to form a new parliament, Shara, the new de facto president of Syria, the former Al-Qaeda commander who took over the country, he will appoint 70 of the 210 parliament members. So he's going to appoint them himself. I bet many of them will be HTS guys. And the remaining 140 will be elected by subcommittees of Syria's Supreme Committee for People's Assembly elections, which Shara also appointed in June. So this is the HTS, Syrian committee that's going to pick the government. And you even see, like, in a lot of headlines, these stories don't explain that. They say, oh, Syria is having its first post-Assad election, but it's not an election at all. It's this group, HTS, Hayat, the former Al-Qaeda affiliate that took over Syria, essentially handpicking a parliament. But I guess we brought democracy to Syria. All right, so the next one here, Trump threatens to bomb Iran again. So President Trump on Sunday said that he would bomb Iran again if the country restarts its nuclear program, warning the U.S. was not going to wait so long this time, a threat that comes amid growing signs that another U.S.-Israeli war against Iran may be coming. So Trump said this in a speech at the Naval Station Norfolk in Virginia. There was a celebration of the Navy's 250th birthday. He said, quote, "The B-2s, what they did, those beautiful flying wings, what they did, they hit every single target. And just in case, we shot 30 Tomahawks out of a submarine," end quote. So he went on to claim that Iran was going to have a nuclear weapon within a month, which is just, there's just no truth to that at all. U.S. intelligence before the war was launched said there was no evidence that Iran was making a bomb. And even recent leaks and stuff show that when Netanyahu was talking about it privately with Israeli officials, he was talking about a threat that was years away. So that whole justification is bogus, but this is what Trump is, going with here. So Trump said, quote, they were going to have a nuclear weapon within a month, and now they can start the operation all over again. But I hope they don't, because we'll have to take care of that too if they do. I'll let them know that. You want to do that, it's fine, but we're going to take care of that, and we're not going to wait so long, end quote. One thing he said that was interesting, and I've heard him say a variation of this before, was that B-2 pilots visited him in the Oval Office and said that the U.S. was working on plans to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities for 22 years, but that no president before Trump wanted to do it. And he's like, oh, but I was the one who did it, as if that's something to be proud of. You're more of a warmonger than, Joe Biden and Barack Obama. I mean, is that what you're trying to brag about here? So Trump's previously acknowledged that he bombed Iran on behalf of Israel. In a September 1st interview with the Daily Caller, he said, quote, look, nobody has done more for Israel than I have, including the recent attacks with Iran, wiping that thing out, end quote. So this new threat from Trump. So Trump has said this before since the ceasefire. He said this a few times, that he would bomb Iran if they restarted enrichment or their nuclear program. I haven't seen him say it in a few months, and I was kind of hopeful that he was, reconsidering. But clearly he's not. And, all the stuff with the snapback sanctions and that report from last week, I've seen Russia, Arab countries are all kind of warning that it looks like another U.S.-Israeli war on Iran could happen very soon. And as I mentioned, did I mention this? I don't know. If they go through with this Gaza plan and there is a ceasefire, Netanyahu's going to want something in return for that. And I think another war with Iran could be what he's given. All right, so the next one here, Hegseth says 4 killed in latest U.S. attack on boat. So this one's from Jason Ditz. He wrote this on Friday. Secretary of War, I almost said Secretary of Defense. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth announced another attack on a small boat in the Caribbean near Venezuela. And this is, same thing, just no evidence, claiming that they killed 4 people who were narco-terrorists. And President Trump went on to claim that the boat was loaded with enough drugs to kill 25 to 50,000 people and was entering American territory. They're really just really lying to us here about this whole thing. But this is at least the 4th boat strike. And so 4 plus 17, 21. So at least 21 people, according to the numbers released by the U.S., have been killed, executed, murdered in these strikes on boats. And this is after, as I covered in the last show, Trump told Congress that the U.S. is now in a non-international armed conflict with drug cartels. Although they're focusing all of this on a country, and you see it in the rhetoric. I mean, Trump said, Hegseth has said, Rubio has talked, they talk about fentanyl, which is the main cause of overdose deaths, fentanyl and other opiates. And it doesn't come from Venezuela. They're not even a player in the game. So, we're just being sold a phony narrative here. All right, so the next one here, Putin says that Tomahawks could ruin U.S.-Russia relations. So Russian President Vladimir Putin warned on Sunday that if the U.S. decided to arm Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles, it could ruin relations between Washington and Moscow. He said, quote, this will ruin our relations or at least the emerging positive trend in these relations, end quote. So a warning from Putin against giving Ukraine Tomahawks, which I've become increasingly skeptical is going to actually happen. Just the more I think about the weapon stuff and what I've seen other people say about the feasibility of actually giving them like a ground-based launcher to fire them. But as we went over last week, there was that report in the Wall Street Journal that Trump signed off on supporting long-range missile strikes inside Ukraine, and that they're looking at giving other missiles that have a range of about 500 miles, which isn't as far as the Tomahawks, but that's still a huge distance that could still reach Moscow from Ukrainian territory. So we'd still be dealing with that same big risk of escalation. So the Keith Kellogg, Lindsey Graham, they seem to be running the show here on the Ukraine proxy war, and escalation does seem to be ahead in some form. All right, so the next one here, Kim warns of U.S. military buildup in South Korea. So this one is from Kyle at the Libertarian Institute. So North Korean Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un warned that the U.S.'s military buildup in South Korea is aimed at establishing the ability to launch a preemptive war. Kim threatened that Pyongyang would develop countermeasures to maintain a balance of power. Essentially saying, he's going to maintain and develop his military. So tensions remain high here. And the U.S. has, deployed more military assets. And, we did see recently Kim say that he would be willing to talk with the U.S. if they dropped the denuclearization demand. So far, we haven't seen any movement on that. Some stuff could be going on behind the scenes. I do think this could be a potentially easy diplomatic win for Trump. On the other hand, there was that report recently from the New York Times that during his last engagement with Kim, he also signed off on a Navy SEAL raid inside North Korea. So, who knows what's really going on. All right, so the last one here, Al-Shabab fighters killed in Mogadishu prison assault. This article is from Al Jazeera. So there's a big attack on a prison in Mogadishu by Al-Shabab. So all 7 attackers who stormed a major prison complex in Mogadishu have been killed following an hours-long gun battle in the largest such assault on the capital in recent months, the Somali government has said. The Al-Shabab group attacked Godka Jalo, an underground prison complex known to hold fighters from Al-Shabab, and this was on Saturday that it started. The government said the assault began with a car bomb blast, followed by the exchange of heavy gunfire and explosions, which rang out across the city, with 3 members of the security forces killed during efforts to quell the attack. In a statement, Al-Shabab said that it launched the attack to free its members from the prison. And it started with, again, a huge blast. It was a car, they snuck in with a truck and started the attack with a car bombing. It says 7 were killed, so it was only 7 Al-Shabab fighters who launched the attack. But it seems to have unsettled, obviously, the residents of Mogadishu, but also, you see quotes in other reporting that Somali security officials are, surprised that they were able to get that deep and launch an attack like this. And also I saw other reports that there was some airstrikes in some other battles with Al-Shabab, so those were likely launched by the U.S., so we'll probably see AFRICOM announce them soon. But this is a war that the U.S. has been fighting since 2007 against Al-Shabaab. And it goes on, and the U.S. has bombed Somalia in 2025 more than any other year ever before. They're up to 80 airstrikes, and that's my count, but it's also been confirmed by, that's what Africa Command has told me. This air war that the U.S. is involved in goes on with virtually no attention. But that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints, one from Dennis Kucinich and Elizabeth Kucinich. Tony Blair and the Gaza Trap, continued colonial control disguised as transition. One from Ted Snyder, how the Pakistan-Saudi Arabia defense agreement changes the region and the world. One from Qasim Muadi, why the Trump-Netanyahu peace plan is a trap. One from Doug Bandow, don't restart the Afghanistan war. Spotlight from Eli Clifton, Oracle executives love Israel, or maybe this isn't the job for you. So go check all that out. We have lots of stuff in the lower part of the page. Lots of news over the weekend. I'm sure there's some big stuff that I've missed. Go check out our blog. But yeah, that is it. So one thing, I'm actually going to be off on Tuesday, so there's not going to be a Wednesday show. I'm doing something pretty exciting, pretty cool, I think. I'll tell you what it is tomorrow. But anyway, that's it. Let me see if there's anything else I got to tell you. I'm trying to think on the spot here, but I don't think so. I feel like I'm missing something though. But again, so there's going to be no Wednesday show. I know I've been taking a lot of days off lately. So I'm sorry about that. But anyway, that's it for me for today. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Let's really hope these negotiations lead to some kind of ceasefire and relief for the people in Gaza. But anyway, I will talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for listening.